June 9th, 2023, Portland, Oregon. The morning light fell across the kitchen table, where a single note waited in thick black marker. Back in 2 weeks. Don't forget their vitamins. Melissa. Next to it, 3 small suitcases, neatly zipped. And the keys to her Tesla, tossed carelessly beside the children's cereal bowls. I thought she must have forgotten something, a passport, a charger, until my phone buzzed. A new alert from the bank. Your account has been frozen. Suspicious withdrawal, $4,200. I opened the app. Every cent from my savings, the money I'd built over years of careful living, was gone. Transferred to Joshua Bennett household account. My son's name. But her hands. Then came the next ping. Melissa's Instagram story. Champagne bubbles. Palm trees. Her legs stretched out by a pool. The caption read, #worktrip #finally free. My fingers went cold. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as I stared at that note again. 2 weeks, 3 children, and a bank account she'd just emptied. I sank into the nearest chair, the world narrowing to the glow of my phone. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, how could they do this to me? If you've ever been blindsided by the people you trusted most, stay. The truth they tried to bury is just beginning. My name is Alice Bennett, and until that morning, I believed my life was made of steady things, order, purpose, quiet usefulness. For 35 years, I served as principal at a public elementary school in Portland, Oregon. I wasn't a woman who demanded attention. I simply showed up every morning, unlocked the doors, greeted each teacher, each child, and believed that doing the right thing quietly was still enough. I built my life on patience. On early mornings with coffee steaming in a blue mug, the same one my husband gave me the year before he died. He worked for the railroads, kind, soft-spoken, a man who could fix anything except time. One winter night, the tracks iced over. His train never made it home. That was 28 years ago, and still, every time I hear a distant whistle, I stop what I'm doing and listen. After he was gone, there was just me and Josh, our son. I poured everything I had into him. The warmth I no longer had anyone to give to, the discipline that kept us afloat. He grew up bright and careful, the kind of boy who used to check that I'd locked the door before bed. He studied engineering, bought his first car with saved internship money, and used to call me every Sunday just to tell me what he'd cooked that week. Then one Sunday, he didn't call. Instead, he brought Melissa. She was beautiful, no denying that. The kind of beauty that draws a room's air toward her, shiny and precise. She extended her hand and said, I've heard so much about you, in a tone that already placed a small, invisible distance between us. I remember thinking, she's polite enough. I didn't yet understand that politeness can be a form of armor. They married quickly, within a year. Josh looked happier than I'd ever seen him, and I told myself that was all that mattered. When their first child, Lily, was born, I spent every afternoon at their house, folding laundry, making soup, giving Melissa time to rest. She thanked me with smiles, thin ones that never reached her eyes. The first real crack came in small moments. Once, as I rocked the baby, she glanced up from her phone and asked, Oh, you bought that from Target? We usually shop at Nordstrom. The sentence floated out lightly, almost like a joke. But I remember how it landed, soft at first, then sharp. I laughed it off, but a quiet chill stayed in my chest for days. Still, I kept helping. I babysat, I cooked, I lent money when Josh's car broke down. Retirement, for me, was never about rest, it was about remaining useful. But with Melissa, usefulness was redefined as servitude. You're retired now, she'd often say, smiling as if explaining something obvious. You don't really do anything, so it's great that you can help. The first few times I laughed. By the 10th, I stopped replying. There's a certain exhaustion that comes from being treated like furniture. Always there, always expected. Never really seen did I noticed how Josh started echoing her tone. Not cruelly, but with hesitation, as if he'd learned to measure affection through her approval. When I'd remind him about bills or doctor appointments, he'd say, Mom, Melissa's handling it. When I offer to help with the kids, she'd say, We've got it under control. and then still call me the next day to babysit. At holidays, I became the spare piece that didn't fit the table's design. On Christmas Eve, she refused my homemade pie. Too many calories. On Easter, she arranged the family photo, so I stood at the very edge. At the children's birthdays, she'd introduce me to her friends as Josh's mom. She's retired, as if that title explained everything about me, but I stayed silent. I told myself she was just young, that she didn't mean harm, that things would soften with time. Yet kindness, when constantly taken for granted, begins to sour inside you. I kept a notebook by my bed, a habit from my years as principal. I used to write notes about students, staff, ideas for improvement. After retirement, it became a place for things I couldn't say aloud. I wrote about how Melissa made me feel small, how I worried about Josh, how the house felt emptier even with laughter in it. Those pages became my only witness. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk through my garden and try to understand what I'd done wrong. I had no enemies, no secrets, no debts. Yet somehow, I'd become invisible in the life I helped build. When Melissa started her marketing company, she told me, "It's women supporting women, you'd love it." I smiled, though I didn't understand what it did. She said she needed help with temporary expenses. I wired her $2,000, then another $500. Josh promised he'd pay me back soon. They never did. But I didn't push. I told myself family doesn't keep score. I had lived long enough to know that love is measured in patience, not numbers. What I didn't know was that patience can be weaponized when placed in the wrong hands. That's who I was before June 9th, a woman who believed that silence, humility, and faith in people were enough to keep a family whole. And that's who they were, my son, gentle but blind with devotion, and the woman who saw my kindness as her opportunity. If you've ever loved someone who slowly rewrote the rules of your world until you barely recognized yourself, stay. The next part is where I finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Did I used to think fractures announce themselves with noise? An argument, a slammed door, a line you could point to and say, there. But the first crack arrived like steam under paint, lifting what looked smooth. It was a Tuesday, rain tapping at the window, the baby asleep in her crib, the monitor whispering low. Melissa stood over the crib, scrolling, nails glossy and pale. I had brought a soft yellow blanket I'd knit during the last weeks before retirement. It matched the lemon print curtains. I tucked the blanket around Lily and whispered, "There we go." Melissa glanced up without smiling. "Oh," she said, tilting her phone for a photo. "You bought that from Target?" "We usually shop at Nordstrom." Target. The word landed like a label. The blanket wasn't from any store. It was from my hands, from evenings when the house sounded too big. Still, I nodded as if she'd offered a useful tip. She posted the photo, cropped so the blanket barely showed, and added a heart. I rinsed a mug and told myself not to be small. Later that week, she started calling me Alice instead of Mom. It came dressed as efficiency. "Alice, could you grab the wipes?" "Alice, your shoes track dirt on the rug." The first time, I thought I'd misheard. The second, Josh laughed as if it were cute. The third, a thread inside me gave way, like a button slipping off in your hand. I tried adjusting. I brought groceries without being asked. Bread, fruit, the yogurt the kids liked. Melissa peered into the bags. "We're avoiding sugar," she said, though a sleeve of macarons hid on the top shelf. When I made soup, she told me the sodium. When I bought a wooden puzzle, she said, "We don't really do clutter." She filmed the children with minimalist blocks and tagged a brand. The house shifted under her rules. Shoes aligned by the door. Clear bins with labels, linen, media, art, though the only art allowed was beige. Josh began to say we about everything. "We're trying a new meal plan." We decided to streamline. Streamline meant my birthday gift was an e-card. Streamline meant the framed photo of my husband disappeared from their hallway. I asked about it. Melissa's smile went crisp. "We're curating a calmer aesthetic," she said. "Nothing personal." She placed a eucalyptus bundle where his picture had been. "This smells like a spa." I couldn't smell anything. At school, I used to resolve disputes with 2 chairs and a tissue box. At home, I learned to solve them by swallowing air. When she laughed at my practical winter boots, I thanked her for the link and never bought it. When she corrected how I held the baby, support the hips, not the back, I adjusted and said nothing. The children didn't notice. They knew only that I came when called. Lily pressed stickers on my sleeves and said, "Grandma is sticky," which made us both laugh. Max handed me his toy trains and asked for stories about real ones, and I told him the clean versions. The baby slept against my chest, heavy and trusting. One afternoon, a glossy folder lay on the island, Melissa Bennett Marketing, embossed in rose gold. Inside were mood boards, champagne, white sand, captions that read, "Elevate your everyday." A note paper-clipped to a payment plan listed family support as a revenue stream. I looked at that line until the letters blurred. When Melissa came in, she slid the folder away with 2 fingers. "It's just a draft," she said. "We're brainstorming." "We?" I asked. "Investors," she said, then smiled. "And partners who believe in me." The crack widened when Josh echoed her language. "Mom, Melissa's brand is taking off," he said. "You wouldn't understand the metrics." He showed me a photo of their pantry, clear containers, uniform labels. "We're optimizing," he added, as if food in boxes were an achievement. That night, I wrote in my notebook, small things but steady. I listed each comment, each omission, each tiny revision of where I was allowed to belong. I didn't want to be petty. I wanted to be accurate. The page looked like weather. Drizzle, wind picking up, pressure dropping. The next morning, Melissa texted, "Need you at 7:45. Important appointment." When I arrived, she was dressed for a shoot. White blazer, no crumbs, perfume like cold water. She handed me a diaper bag and said, "There's cash in the front pocket, just in case." It was $10. I smiled, put it back, and used my own card to buy the children muffins after the park. When we returned, she didn't ask how it went. She posted a reel about self-care. That week she introduced me at a party as Josh's mom. She's retired. I reached out my hand. The woman she introduced me to glanced past me and moved on. I stood there with a phantom hum of my refrigerator in my ear, faint even away from home, as if the sound had followed me. I told myself none of it mattered. I told myself love could hold through small weather. Then June came, and the forecast changed without my permission. That I wish I could say the distance between us grew overnight, that I noticed and had time to name it. But distance is polite, it creeps. It begins as a pause before a greeting, a phone call unanswered because she is in a meeting, a dinner where your story trails off because no one is listening. At first, Melissa's corrections came wrapped in laughter. "Oh, Alice, that's adorable," she'd say when I mispronounced a new app. "You're such a classic." I used to think classic was a compliment. Now I knew it meant outdated. My house used to be the family center. Birthdays, holidays, even simple Sundays, it had warmth, clutter, the smell of cinnamon bread and crayons. But slowly, gatherings moved to their place, where everything was white and spotless. I still brought gifts for the children. Hand-sewn aprons, little sketchbooks, toy trains that reminded me of Josh's childhood. She'd smile, say thank you, and place them on a shelf for later. Later never came. The grandchildren began to mimic her tone. "Mommy says Grandma's house is messy. Mommy says your cookies are too sweet." I'd smile and tell them everyone likes different things, but the words lodged in me like splinters. By then, Melissa's marketing company had become her identity. She posted constantly, her coffee, her desk, her reflection in shop windows. She used the word empowerment like seasoning, sprinkling it over everything. I didn't understand what she sold, but I knew the price. Josh changed too. He no longer called on Sundays. When I phoned, Melissa often answered. "He's busy right now," she'd say, her voice light, professional. "We'll stop by soon." Weeks passed. They didn't. I tried to visit unannounced once, carrying soup and a new puzzle for the kids. Melissa opened the door, but didn't move aside. "Oh, Alice, we're just heading out," she said, sunglasses already on. Behind her, Josh was tying Lily's shoes. Another time? Of course, I said, though I could smell the roast chicken in the oven. As the door closed, I saw my own reflection fade in the glass, smaller, transparent, unnecessary. The holidays that year were quiet. I made my husband's favorite pie, wrapped it carefully, and drove across town. When I arrived, Melissa took one look and said, "Oh, thank you, but we're cutting back on sugar. For the kids." She turned to Josh. "Maybe you can bring it to work?" He nodded, distracted, and set the box aside. That night, I came home and cut myself a slice from another pie I'd baked, just in case. I ate it standing at the counter, the crust flaking onto the plate, and told myself it didn't matter. But something inside me was dimming, like a light bulb nearing its last hours, still giving light, but with a tremor you can't unsee. The following spring, Melissa organized a birthday party for Josh. I offered to help, but she said she had everything handled. I arrived with flowers and found the house filled with people I didn't know, her colleagues, neighbors, online acquaintances. The music was loud, and every photo she took was staged. When I tried to take one of Josh and the children, she stepped in front of my camera. "Lighting's bad here," she said, leading them away. Later, I stood by the kitchen island holding a glass of sparkling water. A man beside me whispered, "Are you the nanny?" I smiled faintly and said, "Something like that." After everyone left, I stayed behind to help clean. Melissa didn't stop me. When I picked up the plates, she said, "Oh, you don't have to." Really? But she didn't take them from my hands either. Josh hugged me at the door and said, "Thanks for being flexible, Mom." I nodded, though I didn't know what he meant. The next day, I wrote in my notebook, "Flexibility, when people reshape you and call it kindness." The weeks after that blurred. I watched the children more often, sometimes overnight, while Melissa went to networking events. She always left precise instructions: organic snacks only, no television, no red dye. Once, she texted me from the airport, "Remember their vitamins. Back in a few days." That phrase would later echo like a prophecy. During one of those stays, I noticed something new. Josh's eyes looked tired, hollow at the edges. When the children ran outside, he lingered by the sink, staring at nothing. "You all right?" I asked. He hesitated.
"Just a lot going on," he said.
"Melissa's company's struggling a bit, but she'll fix it." I nodded, though the air between us felt fragile. I wanted to reach out, to say I'm still here, but Melissa's voice called from the hall, and the moment dissolved. By early summer, the calls about the children came more often. Last-minute trip. Urgent client meeting. Each time, I rearranged my days. Each time, she thanked me with the same phrase, "You're a lifesaver, Alice." Not Mom. Never again, Mom. One afternoon, after a week with the kids, I returned home to find the refrigerator humming softly, a half-empty carton of milk inside. My house felt too quiet. I sat at the table, tracing the wood grain with my fingertip. The clock ticked once, twice. It was June 8th. I didn't know it yet, but the next morning would shatter the pattern entirely. The note sat where she'd left it, a black slash on white paper. I poured water into the kettle, then stopped when my phone shivered. A red banner slid across the lock screen. Account frozen. Suspicious withdrawal $4,200. I set the phone beside the note and breathed once, the way I taught second graders before a test. Then I opened the banking app. When the numbers fixed, they looked the wrong size for my life. Too large, too sudden, too final. Savings, $0. Below it, entries in tight gray type. June 9th, 8/12 transfer to Joshua Bennett household account, $3,800. June 9th, 8/14 service, fee $25. June 9th, 8/15 transfer to MB Marketing Solutions, $400. At the top, Alice M. Bennett. Account nickname, Quiet Nest. I tapped the first transfer. Details unfolded. Authorized user, Melissa B. Bennett. Device, iPhone 14 Pro. Location, PDX area. Memo, Bridge Funds brand launch. Calm arrived the way it sometimes does after a cut. No pain yet, only light. I scrolled further. The previous week showed smaller pieces missing: $62 rideshare, $117 spa, $89 boutique. All marked household, all draining what I saved for quiet emergencies. A new text chimed. Bank alert. Transactions authorized by your daughter-in-law. Call if this is an error. I dialed. A woman with a careful voice asked for my passcode, then my first pet. We flagged the activity, she said. An authorized party initiated transfers to a linked household account and an external business. Do you recognize MB Marketing Solutions? I do, I said, surprised by how even I sounded. She told me it empowers women. Would you like to freeze the cards, Mrs. Bennett? Yes. My voice found its shape. All of them. While she clicked, the house made small noises, refrigerator hum, a dryer beeping upstairs. The children were asleep in the den. 3 small suitcases waited like witnesses by the door. I pressed speaker and took a pen from the drawer. The blue ink felt heavy. Cards are frozen, the banker said. A fraud packet will arrive by email. Because an authorized user initiated the transfers, some funds may be considered valid. I'm sorry. After I hung up, another notification blinked. I tapped without thinking, and Melissa's story filled my screen. Champagne, palm fronds, a gold bracelet I once admired. The caption: #worktrip, #finally free. Finally free from what, I wondered, if not for me. I unlocked the drawer where I keep what matters. Spare keys, my husband's small photograph, his hand on a wooden rail, rain on his glasses. I set the photo on the table, then opened the household folder. Receipts, warranties, the note Josh signed when he borrowed $1,000 for the Subaru brakes. Thanks, Mom. I'll square this by August. Melissa's name wasn't on that paper. She had laughed and said, put it on the family tab. I opened my laptop. The bank email had arrived. Subject: action needed, potential fraud. I downloaded the PDF and filled the boxes the way I once filled attendance forms. Exact ink in exact squares. Date: 06/09. Amount: $4,200. Description: unauthorized use by authorized user. I attached screenshots of the app and the memo line. Another alert: password change on Quiet Nest, initiated from new device. I pressed cancel, then opened security settings. I changed every password I had, writing the new strings in my notebook with the fountain pen Josh gave me when he got his first job. The nib scratched the paper, like a match that would not light. When the house quieted, I stood in the den doorway. 3 sleeping shapes under a cartoon blanket, the small exhale of a child releasing the day. On the coffee table, Lily's flyer for career day. In the margin she had written, Grandma helps. Back in the kitchen, I opened the trash to find the envelope the note had come in, a credit card mailer. I smoothed it, then slid Melissa's note back inside. Evidence. My phone vibrated again. A message from an unknown number. Hi, this is Anna at MB Marketing. Per Melissa, the transfer hit. Thanks for believing in women-owned. I typed and deleted 3 answers. Then I wrote, please remove me from all communications. I blocked the number. At 9:26, Josh texted, everything okay? Melissa said you have the kids. She's wheels up. His contact photo was still the one from his graduation, sun in his hair. I typed, they're asleep. We'll talk tomorrow. I turned off the kitchen light and listened to the house breathe. The refrigerator, the clock, a freezer settling. I rinsed my blue mug, set it on the drying mat, and placed my notebook beside it. On the first clean page I wrote, June 9th, main blow. Then a second line, noted. The children murmured. The suitcases waited. The note watched me from the table, letters thick and certain. I held my husband's photo, the way you hold a compass before a walk in fog. She had taken my money and left me with everything that mattered. For the first time, I understood which part was the gift. So, when the house fell quiet, I made chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table with the note. The steam smelled faintly of apples. The refrigerator hummed like a patient animal. I turned the cup once, then again, the way I used to rotate a test paper before signing my name. Across the hall, the children slept under a heap of cartoon planets, their breaths syncing with the clock. The app still glowed on my phone, $4,200 drained, cards frozen. For years, I had trained myself to absorb small injuries, to label them misunderstandings, to smooth them into silence. That night, the smoothing failed. A line held. I didn't feel rage. I felt borders. I realized I had treated my life like a public building. Lights on, doors open, anyone welcome. Melissa had learned the map better than I had. I carried my blue mug to the sink and rinsed it. The sound was delicate, like chalk dust falling. I dried the mug and set it on the shelf at eye level. A small ceremony. Here is where I stand. Then I opened the notebook I kept beside the sugar jar. I drew a square around the date. June 9th. Under it I wrote, I am not a resource. I am a person. The sentence steadied the room. I listed what I knew with the calm of inventory. Transfers, memos, timestamps, the story post, the suitcases, the keys. Facts mattered. Feelings would follow their lead. I thought about my husband, how he used to tap his pocket twice before a trip to be sure the ticket was there. Trust your hands, he'd say. My hands were steady now. I pulled the household folder closer and clipped the screenshots inside. Evidence has a weight. The folder grew heavier and my chest lighter. I remembered a training I led my last year as principal. When boundaries slip, systems fail. We had posted new dismissal rules on every door. Some parents were angry for a week, then grateful. Children need clarity. Grown-ups need it too. I made a second tea and walked briefly through the rooms. The den with the abandoned crayons, the hallway where my husband's photo now stood on the console, the small guest room where I had set up cots. I touched the blanket I'd knitted for Lily, the one Melissa mislabeled Target. Wool remembers the maker. It warmed my palm. Back at the table, I wrote a plan like a schedule. Call the bank at 9 a.m. and request full audit and written statements. Remove Melissa as an authorized user. Contact Frank Marsh, retired, but careful. Call Caroline from Child Services, confidential consult as a friend. Password reset across all accounts. Speak to Josh in person only, with records in hand. I underlined each line once. No arrows, no decoration. This wasn't about winning. It was about ending the confusion that had replaced respect. The phone buzzed, a late email from the bank titled Fraud Packet. I forwarded it to myself and printed the forms. The printer chattered bravely in the quiet. I signed page 2 with my fountain pen. The ink flared a moment, then settled. I looked at the note again, back in 2 weeks. Don't forget their vitamins. The thickness of the marker felt like a dare. I placed it in a clear sleeve and filed it under June. Then I took the spare keys to Melissa's Tesla, slid them into an envelope, and wrote return on the front. Not a threat, a boundary. When I finally turned off the lights, the house did not feel empty. It felt accurate. I stood in the doorway to the den and listened. 3 small, steady breaths. I whispered, "You're safe," to no one and to everyone. Then I went back to the table, opened the notebook to a clean page, and wrote 2 words I could keep. Time to act. I set an alarm for 6:30. In the morning I would brew coffee, not tea, and place the folder, the envelope, and my list in a canvas tote with frayed handles. I would wear the gray cardigan with deep pockets and the scarf that still smelled faintly of lavender. I would tuck in crackers for the children and the guardianship note from their last overnight. Prepared is a feeling you can taste. Before bed, I walked to each door and tested the locks with 2 fingers. The deadbolt clicked. I checked the stove and the porch light. In the fridge, I labeled a container Friday meatloaf. If the world refused steadiness, I would supply it. On my phone, I set new alerts. Any transaction over $10 would ping me. I changed recovery emails, removed old devices, enabled 2-step prompts. I moved emergency cash from a ceramic jar to a bank envelope and slid it into a cookbook. People forget cookbooks. I drafted a message to Josh. I have records. Come tomorrow at 7, without Melissa. The children are fine. He deserved sleep before the breaking. When I shut the notebook, the pen left a dot on the next page, like a seed. I pressed my palm there and felt my pulse answer. I blew out the vanilla candle. The wick glowed and went dark. At the window, the Portland sky held its slate color. Somewhere, a plane rose toward palm trees and champagne. I was done financing departures. In bed, purpose found me first, then sleep. Morning would bring coffee, phone calls, signatures, and some light on the table. I am a teacher. Consequences are not cruelty. They are the other half of love. On the notebook's new page, I wrote the lesson I wished someone had taught me sooner and left it open to dry. I am allowed to close my doors. At dawn, the sky was the color of steel. I woke before the alarm and lay still for a moment, listening to the slow breathing of the house. For the first time in months, I didn't feel dread. I felt purpose, thin, clear, and steady, like a line drawn by a ruler. By 6, I had brewed coffee, fed the cat, and packed the tote with the documents, bank statements, screenshots, Melissa's note, the envelope labeled return. I dressed simply, gray cardigan, clean jeans, hair tied back. My reflection looked older, but honest. The woman in the mirror finally matched the life she'd been living. At 7, I called Frank Marsh, an old colleague from the school board who'd gone into law before retirement. He answered on the second ring. "Frank, it's Alice Bennett." "Well, if it isn't the best principal the city ever lost," he said warmly. "What brings you up this early? I need your eyes on a financial matter. And your discretion." His tone shifted. "Serious?" "Yes," I said. "And personal. Come by at 10. Bring everything." Next, I called Caroline from Child Services. We'd worked together on a custody case years ago. She answered with her usual briskness. "Alice, good morning." "Morning, Caroline. I need a professional opinion off the record. Something about temporary guardianship and potential financial exploitation." She was quiet for a beat. "You're not in danger, are you?"
"No."
"Just preparing." "All right," she said. "Send what you have. I'll take a look before lunch." By 8, Josh arrived. He looked rumpled, eyes hollow, still wearing yesterday's jacket. I met him at the door with coffee and silence. "Where's Melissa?" I asked. "Flying," he said. "She mentioned a conference in Palm Springs. The kids okay?" "They're eating cereal," I said. "Sit down." He did. I slid the folder across the table. His eyes flicked over the pages. Bank transfers, authorization forms, the memo, bridge funds, brand launch. His lips parted, then shut again. "She used your access," I said quietly. "Through the joint household account." He kept reading. "She said it was temporary. Marketing expenses. She drained my savings, Josh." He pressed his palms against his eyes.
"God."
I reached across and touched his sleeve. "Look at the dates."
He did.
June 9th. That's when she left for the trip. "She called it work," I said. "But the bank calls it theft." He nodded slowly, then opened his phone. I watched him scroll through messages, screenshots, email threads. After a while, he said, "You're not the first. She's been borrowing against my line of credit. I thought I was helping her business. There's over $38,000 in debt under my name." Caroline's voice echoed in my memory. Financial exploitation often hides behind love. "Josh," I said, "this is not about punishment. It's about stopping the damage." He swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Let me talk to Frank first." At 10, we sat in Frank's small downtown office. He read every line, tracing them with his pen. "This is clean," he said. "You documented everything. What can we do?" I asked. "First, revoke her access to all shared accounts. File a fraud affidavit, not criminal yet, but protective. Then, I'll draft a temporary guardianship petition so the children stay with you if she disappears again. As for Josh's credit, we'll freeze it immediately." Josh nodded numbly. "Do it." Frank turned to me. "You've always been careful, Alice. It's time to let that pay off." We spent the next 2 hours signing forms, printing affidavits, notarizing signatures. My hand cramped, but I kept writing. Each signature was a reclaiming. By noon, Caroline called back. Alice, I've checked her records. Your daughter-in-law has $38,000 in unsecured debt and at least one complaint from a former client. I'll document the pattern. If she challenges guardianship, this will help.
Thank you, I said.
When we left the office, the sun had risen fully. Josh stood on the sidewalk, staring at the traffic. She's been doing this all along, hasn't she? Yes, I said softly. But now it's our turn. That evening, I cooked pasta for the children and waited. The phone stayed silent. Melissa didn't call to check on them. Didn't ask about the house or the frozen accounts. At 9, I gathered the children's backpacks and tucked the signed guardianship note inside each one, just in case. Then I took out my notebook and added a new heading. Action completed. Underneath, I wrote, bank accounts secured. Cards canceled. Legal steps initiated. Son informed. The list steadied me more than sleep could. At midnight, I looked out the window. The streetlights shimmered against wet pavement. Somewhere far away, a plane descended into Portland. I imagined Melissa walking through arrivals, tanned, confident, unaware of the quiet machinery now moving against her. Tomorrow, she would find the accounts closed, her cards declined, her access denied. She would call, and for once, I would let the phone ring. I closed the notebook and whispered the same words I'd written that morning. Time to act. For years, I had been the helper, the reliable one, the invisible one. That night, I became something rarer, someone with boundaries. The kettle clicked off automatically, and the house was still again. I poured the last of the coffee into my blue mug, sipped once, and smiled at the quiet. It was the sound of control returning. 7 days passed before she came back. I knew the exact hour because I'd marked it in my notebook. June 16th, for 12 p.m., the time her Tesla rolled into the driveway like nothing had ever happened. The children were coloring at the table. Josh sat beside me, pale but composed, the folder of documents in his lap. Frank had come too. He said it was best to have a witness. The air smelled faintly of basil and printer ink. When Melissa walked through the door, she was bronzed, glowing, dragging 2 designer suitcases. Her sunglasses were perched on her head like a crown. "Hi, everyone," she sang out. "Oh, thank God. You survived without me." The children ran to her. She knelt down and hugged them quickly, her eyes flicking to the folder in Josh's hands. "What's all this? You look serious." Josh didn't answer. He turned on the small speaker on the table. A click, then her own voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "Once the old lady signs everything, we'll move to Florida. She won't even notice." Melissa froze. "What is that?" "Your own voice," Josh said evenly. "You said that last month on speaker, while you thought my phone was off." Her face drained of color. "You can't record me without consent. That's illegal." "So is stealing," I said quietly. Frank leaned forward. "Melissa, I'm Frank Marsh. I'm representing Alice and Josh for the time being. Please sit." She didn't. Her hands trembled just slightly, the charm bracelet jingling against her wrist. "You're all overreacting. It was just a loan. Temporary, like I told Josh." "Loans require consent," Frank said. "We've already filed for fraud review, debt verification, and a guardianship order. You'll receive copies by mail." She blinked. "Guardianship? What's that supposed to mean?" "That the children stay here," I said, "until your finances and living situation are verified. You left without notice. That's considered abandonment under Oregon law." Her voice rose an octave. "Abandonment? Are you insane? I was working. I was doing this for us." Josh stood, voice shaking but firm. "For us? You've been using my name for credit cards, Melissa. I got the bank notifications. They froze everything." She turned to him, voice low and desperate. "You don't understand. I had to keep the company afloat. It was supposed to be temporary." "You've said that for years," he said. "Temporary doesn't mean you drain my mother's life savings." Her shoulders slumped. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of truth." Silence stretched between them like a bridge that had finally cracked. Frank closed his folder. Melissa, you should leave peacefully tonight. There's no restraining order yet, but if you attempt to remove the children or any property, the police will be involved. You can contact your attorney in the morning. She stared at me, her face pale, mascara beginning to smudge. You think you've won, don't you? I didn't move. There's nothing to win, only to stop. She exhaled sharply, grabbed one suitcase, and stormed toward the door. The wheels rattled against the tile. At the threshold, she turned back. You'll regret this, Alice. I met her gaze. No, I said. I regret waiting this long. The door slammed. The children flinched, then went quiet. Josh sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. Frank reached over and closed the folder, his gesture deliberate, final. Now it's documented, he said. 2 days later, Josh filed for divorce. Melissa's marketing company went dark within a week. The debt collectors began calling her instead of him. Her social media turned silent. The perfect photos disappeared one by one. I didn't celebrate. I just kept walking through the steps. Paperwork, guardianship hearings, routine. Caroline from Child Services came by, reviewed the home, the finances, the children's care. Everything looks stable, she said. You did the right thing. Stable. It was a word I hadn't heard in years. At night, when the house was quiet, I'd hear Lily whispering to her dolls, "Mommy's on a trip." I didn't correct her. Some truths are better introduced slowly, like dawn through curtains. By September, Melissa's business was declared insolvent. She tried to contest the fraud claims but couldn't produce receipts. The court ruled most of the funds must be repaid. Josh's credit was cleared, his accounts reinstated. He started therapy, and sometimes I'd find him sitting in the yard, watching the children play, his face softer than I'd seen it in months. He said once, "I thought love meant covering for someone." I said, "Sometimes it means uncovering what they've done." Melissa sent one final email, long, defensive, full of half apologies and blame. I printed it, filed it under evidence, and never replied. That winter, the children drew a family portrait at school. 4 figures stood in the snow, 3 small, 1 taller. The caption said, "At Grandma's house." The teacher handed it to me during pickup. "They talk about you all the time," she said. That night, I framed it and hung it above the kitchen table where the note had once been. Same place. New story. When I turned off the lights, I looked at the drawing again, the little faces, the smiling sky, and realized the house finally sounded right. Not silent. Not chaotic. Just alive. And somewhere beyond that, I imagined Melissa facing the noise of her own consequences. The calls, the creditors, the empty accounts. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the quiet of a woman locking her own door at last. 6 months later, the house had learned to breathe again. Mornings began with toast and watercolor paper spread across the dining table. The children painted while I made coffee. The smell of acrylic mixed with cinnamon, a new sort of home. I'd kept the same blue mug. Its chipped rim reminded me where things had once cracked and how they'd held anyway. After Melissa left, there were hearings, papers, court dates. All orderly, all necessary. I kept my tone calm, my sentences short, the way I had during school board meetings. The judge thanked me for my clarity and composure. I didn't tell him clarity was all that kept me from collapsing. By November, guardianship became official. The papers arrived with embossed seals, the ink catching light as I read my name. Alice Bennett, legal guardian of minors Lily, Max, and Aaron Bennett. Josh sat beside me at the kitchen table when I opened the envelope. He didn't speak for a while, just nodded. "Mom," he said finally. "Thank you for staying steady when I couldn't." I reached for his hand. "That's what we do," I said. "We steady what shakes." He'd found work again, engineering contracts, remote for now. He paid rent for a small apartment nearby, but spent most evenings here, helping with homework or fixing the leaky faucet. Melissa's calls had stopped months ago. Her last message was a photo of palm trees and a caption, "Starting fresh." I wished her peace and deleted it. December brought the idea that changed everything. It started when Lily asked, "Grandma, can you show my friend how to paint a bird like yours?" The next day, two of her classmates were sitting at our table, brushes in hand. By January, there were 10 children in the sunroom every Saturday, splattering color onto canvas. I filed for a local license and opened a small program, the Bennett Family Art School. The city clerk smiled at the application. "You sure you want to take this on?" she asked. "I've been taking things on my whole life," I said. "Might as well do it on purpose." The first official class met on February 3rd. The walls still smelled of fresh paint, mint white and pale blue. Josh built low tables from reclaimed wood. The children's easels stood like small gates opening to possibility. Some of the kids came from single-parent homes, some from shelters nearby. I charged nothing the first month. They came anyway, wide-eyed, hungry for color. By March, I had a waiting list. The local paper ran a small piece. "Retired principal opens art haven for children." The reporter asked, "What inspired you?" I told her, I wanted a space where kindness can't be used up. Each afternoon, I watched the children painting, laughter lifting from their tables like birds startled into flight. Sometimes Josh would step in to fix a wobbly stool or help a child mix primary colors. Watching him, I saw the boy he'd been, the careful one, rebuilding what broke. At home, evenings returned to rhythm. Dinner at 6, baths at 7, bedtime stories after. The children always asked for the same one, about the train that never stopped, only changed tracks. They knew parts by heart. On Mother's Day, the sunlight fell across the porch just as I finished watering the plants. The children came running out, Lily carrying an envelope decorated with stickers. "Open it, Grandma." Inside were 3 papers, each signed in careful handwriting. At the top, "We want you to be our forever guardian." Below, drawings of hearts, trains, and paintbrushes. I pressed the papers to my chest. "Oh, my loves," I whispered. Josh stood in the doorway, eyes bright. "They insisted," he said. For the first time in years, I cried, not from pain, but from the kind of relief that tastes like gratitude. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I walked through the quiet rooms. The lavender candle flickered on the counter, and the refrigerator hummed its familiar tune. I touched the frame above the table, the children's drawing of Grandma's house. Under it now hung a new one, the 3 of them painting me behind them, holding a brush like a torch. I thought about the word guardian. It used to sound heavy. Now it felt like air filling the lungs. I keep the same notebook, though most pages are clean. The last entry reads, "The opposite of betrayal is creation." Every brushstroke, every lesson, every laugh from those children is proof that something new can grow from what was stripped away. Sometimes, when the evening light turns the windows gold, I still hear Melissa's voice somewhere in memory, sharp, distant, like the sound of a train on another track. It doesn't sting anymore. It reminds me of direction. I lock the doors each night with the same steady hand, pour tea into my blue mug, and think, the line between loss and freedom is thinner than anyone tells you. And across that line, I've built a home filled with art, noise, and grace, the kind that doesn't ask permission to exist. I no longer ask, how could they do this to me? Some questions aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be outgrown. I've learned that not everyone values kindness, but that doesn't make kindness weak. When it stands beside truth, it becomes something stronger. Dignity. Melissa's betrayal no longer defines me. It only marks the point where my silence ended. I've seen how quickly control can be taken and how calmly it can be reclaimed. Each morning, I unlock the doors of my art school, smell paint and soap, and watch children arrive carrying nothing but trust. That's enough. If anyone ever says I'm a woman who doesn't do anything, I'll smile and tell them, I've already done everything. And more. If this story touched something quiet inside you, stay. Here, silence becomes strength.